homeschooling isn't always picture perfect. Welcome to Homeschooling with Dr. B, where we'll help you find solutions to the challenges you face and celebrate your successes with you. Now, please welcome your host, Dr. B.
Welcome, my tenacious homeschool tribe. This month, we're talking about things I wish I knew before I started homeschooling. But first, let's thank our sponsor, Hydrofeet. Hydrofeet for kids. To be precise, the insole that massages their feet with every step. Use the code OMB15OFF for an additional 15% off your Hydrofeet purchase. You can also find them on Amazon, but I don't believe the code will work there. It will only work on their site. And don't forget that you get 2 pairs if you're willing to pay for the second one's shipping and handling. Additionally, they do not have to be the same size. So if your kids have different size feet, like for example, I have my bugaboo that's 6 years old and he still uses, the little ones, or you have an older child that uses a 3 or a 2, you can get 2 different sizes. We just absolutely love Hydrofeet in our family. So today I'm going to talk about commitment being the key to success when it comes to homeschooling. As a homeschool mom, there have been many, many times when I would have rather not homeschool that day. I would have rather read a book, slept in, or gotten in my pool, hang out with my bookie friends. Today we had a book club meeting. And there were certainly times when my kids were driving me crazy that I wanted to say, okay, I've had enough. You could just go to school. I don't want to deal with it anymore. But overall, one of my biggest concerns was that I was doing a good job. And this fed my insecurity and constantly made me wonder if I was right to be homeschooling my kids. This was in the beginning. That's certainly not something that I even consider nowadays. So that doubt eats at you like a little drip on your kitchen sink that turns into a gusher. And just think about what a small stream of water can do. It can, over time, become the Grand Canyon. So that self-doubt can just really get into you. What I didn't realize at the time, and I soon learned through some of my homeschooling mom friends, is that if you let that self-doubt really get into you, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You believe you can't do a good job. You believe you're going to fail. You believe it's overwhelming, and it will be all of those things. So how do you avoid the pitfalls and commit to being a homeschooling family if that's what you want to do? The first thing is, don't obsess. One of my daughters suffers from anxiety. I suffer from anxiety. And one of the things that just makes you even more anxious is you start obsessing on something. And it's the same principle when it comes to homeschooling. If you're obsessing about whether your children should be in school or you should be homeschooling, you're spending a lot of time on negative thoughts. You want to homeschool, just homeschool. Don't waste your time second guessing yourself. And sometimes moms will say, well, what if I'm not that good of a teacher? First of all, I often remind moms, you've been teaching your child since your child was born. You taught them to walk. You taught them to eat. You taught them to speak. Those are difficult things to teach a child, and yet you did them. You're capable of teaching anything you want to teach. Additionally, be honest with yourself. I went to a very good public school and I had some great teachers. But you know what I also had? I had some lousy teachers. And I had some teachers that were so-and-so. Even if you decided to send your kids back to school, doesn't mean that they're going to get the perfect teacher. It doesn't happen. My daughters, they went to private school preschool, kindergarten, first, and second grade. Out of those 4 years, they had a fabulous teacher once, Mrs. Peterson. She was amazing. The other teachers, one was truly mediocre. The other one was relatively new to teaching, and she still lacked experience to deal with challenging children, such as mine, who had ADHD in the severe range. So the thing to remember is that all of those self-doubts, you're really just being too hard on yourself. And my recommendation is don't give yourself permission to second guess your decision to homeschool. You can start by saying or setting the goal, I will homeschool this year. At the end of the year, I will reassess the situation. But don't obsess on it the rest of the year. Don't do that to yourself and don't do that to your kids. And let's be honest, your kids are going to be doing it to you if they're used to going to public school or private school. My kids did it to me. It lasted about a month. And now the twins who have been homeschooled since the third grade won't go back to a traditional school setting for anything in the world. They just won't even consider it. The second thing is you're going to have to be disciplined. And if you heard some of my previous episodes, you know I'm a planner. I love to plan. I have no problem with that. I have a big problem with grading. I always want to leave it to the last minute. And I really have to be disciplined about doing it on the same day at the same time. Now it might be that you choose to do it like me on a certain day, but maybe you don't specify the time, or you choose to do it once a month. However you choose to go about it, be disciplined, commit to it. Be disciplined and focus on your homeschool choice. You committed to homeschooling, homeschool. Don't allow yourself to second guess your choice. Remember, you have to give someone permission to mess with your head. When people start asking me, are you sure you should be homeschooling? This is after I've been homeschooling very successfully for 5 years. Was it 5 or 6? Let's see. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth. 6 years. My kids test off the charts. They're incredibly smart. They're hard workers. Right now we're going through the teen years where they fight doing their schoolwork a little bit, but that's normal. And it's a phase that will pass. So when other people question me, I just say, I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in discussing my choice with you or our family choices with you. Think about it. Okay? Just think about it for a second. Your friend, your family member that's criticizing your choice, do you get a vote? Do you get an opinion? What school they send their children to? How much they pay for school? What hours they're in school? Etc., etc. You don't. And they don't get to criticize your choice. So be disciplined and cut it off as soon as possible, because if not, it will become part of that trip. The other big thing is encourage perseverance. I just recently read a great book. I think I should show it to you. There's no plan B for an A game. The bottom line is, if you don't have a plan B, you have to make plan A work. Plan A being homeschooling. If you're facing a challenge, reach out for help, reach out for support. If a curriculum isn't working, know that it happens to all of us, even the experienced homeschoolers. You can change it, you can trade it. The bottom line is you have to commit to being a homeschooling family. You cannot let your self-doubts or the doubts of others sway your choice. One of the things that I've had to learn in my life, and that was definitely reinforced by homeschooling, is that you should turn your obstacles into opportunities for growth. You need to look for ways to overcome challenges rather than adopting a defeatist attitude. So when my ADHD child struggled to learn her multiplication tables in the third grade, I didn't get angry. I was frustrated, but I didn't get angry. I looked for ways to teach her multiplication tables. So I did extensive research on YouTube, and there's all these little tricks to learn your multiplication tables. And it worked for some of the timetables, but it didn't work for all of them. So I sat down with my child and I asked her, how do you think you learn best? Well, at the time, she was really into Roblox. And she says, I learn best on phone apps. I said, okay, let's give it a try. And I got her a multiplication phone app. She memorized her multiplication tables. Now, to be honest with you, I've never been keen on using a lot of electronics in the room. I'm old-fashioned when it comes to that, because I've read many studies, for example, that indicate that reading an actual book, your child advances in reading comprehension a lot faster than reading the same book on a tablet. So I'm not big on apps. I'm not big on using electronics, but I've learned that our kids are used to using electronics. And while I fought it in the beginning, I've now fully incorporated electronics into our homeschooling. The bottom line is you need to improvise, adapt to thrive. And I have done a lot of improvisation. I've adapted to a lot of changes, and I've adopted a lot of things to make them work for us. And everybody in our homeschooling family has thrived because of it. I mean, think about it. I have a child that has severe ADHD. She has Tourette's and is extremely hyper. And she tests in the language arts at ending college level, math beginning college level. When we did that test, she was only midway through the 8th grade. So it goes back to what I said. Turn your obstacles into growth opportunities. Another time I used to think of my daughter as an obstacle was that when I taught math, she would often force me to stop, to go slower. She would ask me 50 bazillion questions. And she wasn't satisfied with, for example, in order to divide fractions, you have to do the reciprocal of the fraction, and then you multiply. My other daughter was like, okay, that's just the way it is. I'm going to do it. Not a big deal. My daughter, the one that has ADHD, wouldn't go for that. I can't tell you how many hours I spent researching why it had to become a reciprocal. But I found out. I explained it to her. She was satisfied. We were able to move on. And because of her, all of my kids are better mathematicians because she forces me to stop. She forces me to find information that I'm not even interested in, but that will definitely enrich my children's learning experience, and forces me to learn to teach math, not just one way, but several different ways. So even though she seems like an obstacle in my math lessons, she makes me a better mathematician, and in turn, I make them better mathematicians. Another key point is you have to ensure that you give it your best shot. And that's really, really key in successful homeschooling. If you lack discipline, perseverance, and you're constantly second-guessing yourself, you will not try your best. Your obstacles will seem insurmountable. I had a girlfriend whose child balked every single time at the idea of starting a math lesson. So she would put it off for later in the day. We'll leave it to the next day. We'll leave it to the following day. And pretty soon, the child was a year behind in their mathematics. Now, does math matter to every family? No. But for families that are college-bound, it does. And my friend was definitely college-bound. So she created the situation that became insurmountable from her perspective. She was a year behind in math. And she asked me, what should I do? And my response was easy. Teach math. He doesn't like it. Would he like it any better if he was going to school? No. Okay. What's the difference? So we have to do the hard things to do the fun, enjoyable things. You have to allow yourself to immerse in homeschooling. There's a whole culture to it. You can become part of groups, and you will certainly find a lot of support in those groups. I mean, there are so many wonderful ladies and not that many guys, but they can be pretty wonderful too, that will help you throughout your journey. So let's go back to those points. Don't obsess. Be disciplined. Encourage perseverance. Turn your obstacles into growth. And ensure you give it your best shot. If you can't do those things, what I have found in my experience with many homeschooling families is it virtually guarantees that you will send your child to school. People decide that homeschooling is too hard. I often hear, well, I just don't have the time. My child is impossible to teach. I'm limiting my child's educational options. It's just too hard. You can choose your own excuse. You really can. I mean, for me, the easiest excuse would have been my health. I can't tell you how many times I spent several weeks in the hospital during our homeschooling journey. But our family has always made it work, and we excel because we've made the commitment to homeschool. Now, when I started on this homeschooling journey, I had an end goal. That was the 5th grade. At the end of the 5th grade, I fully expected to put my children in middle school so that they would be ready to go on to high school. I fully committed to the elementary school years. I was on board, and we had an absolute blast. We had so many field trips, experiments, projects, dance classes, jujitsu classes, soccer classes. I mean, we were full of activities. It was an amazing experience. We made a lot of great friends. I had not planned on homeschooling middle school, but we decided to travel. And when we started traveling, we fell in love with an island in the Caribbean, and we decided we wanted to live there. So suddenly I found myself with very limited traditional educational options for my children. And my kids were not interested in going to the public schools or the local private school. So then I committed to homeschool middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And I did that quite successfully, I may add. But I was supposed to be done then. Okay, the kids were supposed to go to high school. We had planned on either putting them on boarding school or working something out so that they could go to school in Florida. One of my daughters decided she really wanted to do that. My other 2 daughters, my twins, didn't want anything to do with it. They kept looking at me and saying, I'm not going to have a life. I'm not going to be able to handle my issues. My daughter with ADHD and Tourette said she was really shocked when we looked at the schedule for a high school student in Celebration, Florida. And she realized she was going to be spending all of her day in school. And then she said, okay, so if the classes are only 40 minutes, when do I get to do my schoolwork? And I said, well, when you come home, then you do your homework. And she said, well, how long is that going to take? We had been asking around some of the children that were attending Celebration High School, and they said on average 5 hours, 4 to 5 hours. And my daughter wanted to know, well, then when am I going to do the activities that I enjoy? Or when am I going to explore my interests? And I said, well, all of that needs to be explored through high school, because really, when you factor in the homework time, you really are only going to have time to maybe take 1 or 2 extracurricular activities. And they were like, I don't think so. Now, that didn't mean that I was obligated to homeschool through high school. And I really had to think about it. I'm used to tracking grades. I'm used to tracking classes. I'm used to doing the work, and I can certainly teach high school. I have a strong background in the sciences and the math, but having a master's in sociology also means that I have a pretty good handle on writing. But I'm 55 this year, and the idea of teaching high school for the next 4 years and dealing with my teenagers 24/7, I really had to ask myself, am I willing to do that? Am I interested in doing that? Will it enrich the life of my children? Will it enrich my life? And I decided that yes, all of those things would happen. So even though I had never planned on homeschooling high school, here we go again. I'm going to homeschool high school. I'm fully committed. I'm going to do it. Will there be challenges ahead? I'm sure there will be. But back to those principles. I'm fully committed. So I'm sure the next 4 years will be full of improvisation, adaptation, and we will thrive. Life can be overwhelming, but remember, homeschooling doesn't have to be. We just started a homeschooling support group on Facebook. Check us out by searching for Homeschooling with Dr. B. For more links and resources, please visit our website. You can start finding some free stuff up there. Till next week, enjoy your kiddos.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Homeschooling with Dr. B. Head over to homeschoolingwithdrb.com for more information and resources. That's homeschoolingwithdrb.com. Until next time.